Okay, I think we're going to get started. Hi, everyone. It's so great to host this webinar today. We have a great set of panelists. Today, we're going to be talking about the update in PG County's surveillance mandate. We have a cast of characters today. We have Brian Andler, who is the VP of Government Affairs for AOBA. Brian has extensive knowledge in municipal law in Maryland. He previously served as the Chief of Staff to the Montgomery County Planning Board and the Deputy Chief of Staff to the Montgomery County Council. We have our Whitney Frasier here, who is our VP of Sales at Cloudastructure, and she'll be talking a little bit about our solution, although the focus today is really to talk about the PG County mandate. And then we have a recurring guest, Melinda McBeth. She's a litigator at Offit Kurman. She has spent 6 years representing landlords and property management companies, focusing mostly on residential and commercial property. She includes lease construction, fair housing disputes, administrative agency complaints, breach of contract defense, and civil litigation. And of course, I'm Lauren O'Brien. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Cloudastructure, and I am facilitating the conversation today. So we're really focusing on the background of the PG County law, the mandate for security surveillance. It has been complicated. It has been changing. So really, we want to bring to you more information so that you can be prepared when you deploy your security solutions in the most effective manner. So we'll talk about what's in the law, what's changed, what does it mean to have enforcement and to be really adhering to the law. What are some solutions out there that you can consider? But mostly, we're here to answer your questions. So Whitney, I want to turn this one over to you. Talk a little bit about Cloudastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't go into a full pitch here for you guys, but Cloudastructure is hyper-focused on serving our partnerships that are specifically in multifamily, commercial mixed use. And we really focus on not only AI surveillance, which is, making sure that you're covered from a liability standpoint, but we also are a very proactive solution with our partnerships in offering remote guarding. So it's all integrated under one roof and it's streamlined and it's very user-friendly. So if you guys are interested in learning more, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm super happy to connect you to one of our wonderful sales reps and they can kind of dive a little bit deeper. But Cloudastructure is definitely hyper-focused in the multifamily space and excited to answer any questions you guys may have.
Yeah, and we are deploying in PG County right now, and we have a strong implementation team. So if you also have just questions about how to even do some of this stuff, we're here to help you as well. So feel free to reach out. Okay, so Melinda, over to you. Tell us a little bit about Offit Kurman.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I think most of you are familiar with Offit Kurman. We are a multi-service law firm here in the United States. We do every type of case except for auto accident, personal injury, and criminal cases. So we do full service civil litigation. We have a commercial litigation department. We, of course, have our landlord representation group, of which I'm a part. We have offices all up and down the East Coast. And as of last year, we now also have offices in Los Angeles, California. So we are one of the fastest growing law firms in the country. I just saw this morning that we were named the 19th largest law firm in the Baltimore area. And we're also a part of what's called the AmLaw 200, which means we're one of the top grossing law firms in the country, one of the top 200. So I'm very happy to have been lured over to Offit Kurman a couple years ago. A lot of you know Todd Kelting, who I work very closely with. We've got a whole team of attorneys in our Maryland landlord tenant group. And we are happy to answer any questions that you have. And I am looking forward to delving more into this particular discussion with Whitney and Brian and Lauren.
I did not know that about Offit Kurman. Congratulations. That is super exciting.
Thank you. I had a lot to do with it.
Yeah. We enjoy having Melinda as a partner in really helping us decipher the PG County law, but also just in general regarding multifamily issues. So thanks again for coming on board. Okay, so Brian, can you tell us a little bit about AOBA?
Sure. So the apartment and office building of Metropolitan Washington is the NAA local affiliate for the DMV, representing multifamily and office building owners and operators in the DC suburbs and DC proper. In Maryland, I am vice president for Montgomery and Prince George's County. Our sister organization, MMHA, represents multifamily property owners elsewhere outside of Montgomery and Prince George's County. So you can think of me as the multifamily industry's sort of lead lobbyist, both locally in Montgomery and Prince George's, but also at the state level. This afternoon, I'll be in a hearing in the House Environment and Transportation Committee, criminal background screening issue. So I can't be on camera. I had a bit of a rough start with my child's school this morning. I won't be able to turn my camera on, but here to provide more context about the Prince George's County law and answer any questions you all have as someone who worked directly on that.
We're very happy to have you, Brian. Thanks for joining us today. And I'm sure all the folks here today are grateful that you are driving some of this across the finish line for PG County. So what is the law? This is an opportunity for Melinda and Brian to kind of chime in, but just give us some of the touch points of what we're looking at here.
I'm sure I can handle it, and then Brian can jump in if he has any additional insight, which I know he does, because he worked very closely with the county council in getting this law drafted and passed. So basically the background here is that PG County has had an increase in violent crime, in property-related crime. I think a lot of places across the state and the country have. I personally, most people know I live in Baltimore City, so I've seen quite a bit lately. As far as, car theft, car vandalization, all those kinds of things. So the county council here decided that they were going to implement the security camera mandate requiring landlords who own what they've termed high occupancy buildings, that's anything with 100 units or more, to have security cameras throughout their properties. The purpose of this is to hopefully help combat some of the crime that we've been seeing. And if you can't stop it, then at the very least, you know how to prosecute it when it does happen, because then hopefully you will have security footage of whatever actually occurred. So you are now required, if you are a high occupancy landlord in PG County, to install cameras across your property. Each camera has to have a 180-degree field of vision. Each camera has to have a minimum resolution of 1080p. It has to be watermarked to reflect date and time. And you're going to be required to store the footage from your cameras for no less than 30 days, a minimum of 30 days. Now, if a tenant, a law enforcement officer, or a person with a bona fide interest requests footage related to a specific incident that occurred on the property, and they notify you of that, then you're required to save the footage for at least 180 days from the date of this request. There's specific requirements in the law about where you put the cameras. They're going to have to be covering all the communal areas and facilities within the community. They need to cover the parking areas, the access and perimeter roads where you've got ingress and egress to the community, the pedestrian sidewalks, the landscaped areas, trash enclosures, and recreational areas. Basically, the way that I think about it is any place where the general public can get access to, where access is not specifically restricted to tenants and residents of the building, they want you to have cameras there.
Terrific. Brian, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that was a great summary. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about these specific provisions with the field of view and the resolution a little bit more. But no, I think that was a great summary. Thank you.
All right. So what really has changed? Because it has moved up and down. And then maybe if you guys could speak about, is this really the final, or do you think more changes are going to come down the line even after June?
Yeah, so why don't I take this one? So as you all can imagine, we, AOBA, heard a lot from our members about the potential cost of compliance, particularly for our garden-style communities that have many more entrances and exits than, say, like a mid or high-rise building, including, for example, like terrace or walkout level apartments. So there was a little bit of uncertainty as to whether like terrace and walkout level apartments would have to have cameras as well. So we went back to the council and over the course of 2024, really tried to work with them on a solution that worked for our garden style community. The biggest thing that changed is the subsequent bill that passed had a provision that for garden style communities, you could have a camera that's covering multiple entrances and exits. It doesn't have to be one per entrance and exit, as long as, there's a camera that within its field of view can see an entrance and exit, then you would be sufficiently covered. And as you sort of heard previously, the idea is that if there are communal areas or parts of the property where, there's a potential for a crime to occur in public, that there be cameras that can potentially capture that and provide, another tool for law enforcement to help investigate those crimes. So that's sort of the biggest change. The bill and law itself, if you're looking at the bill text, gets a bit confusing because they make references to properties that do not have a elevator, for example. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this when it comes to enforcement. But the guidance that we've gotten from the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement, and that we've put out to our members, is that as long as everyone kind of has an idea of what a garden-style community looks like, so as long as it looks like a garden-style community, kind of functions like a garden-style community, it would fall under that lesser standard of requirements rather than having one for every single entrance and exit.
Okay. Melinda, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Brian covered it pretty well. This bill is a little bit confusing. I agree. I actually think it's one of the less confusing bills that the PG County Council has pushed out over the last few years. It's a little cleaner and easier to interpret than some of the other things that we've gotten from them recently, but obviously there's still a lot of gray area there, and there are some open questions that I think it's going to be interesting to see how these play out, how the courts interpret this, how the county interprets this, how the county enforces this. But getting the definition of the garden style apartments into the bill was a pretty big win for landlords and for AOBA. When the original law came out, that was the number one question that I got was, well, we're a garden style apartment and we have 27 buildings. Do you mean that we now need 27 cameras? And the original answer was, yes, I think you do, just based on the way that the law is written. So it's nice that we at least have some clarity in that portion of the law, even if we are still seeking clarity in other areas.
Yeah, no, and I realized I neglected to answer sort of the second part of that question, which was, is this sort of settled or can we expect any additional changes? The sense that we've gotten from this council is that this was the only changes that they wanted to make. So barring any major changes in the composition of the council, I don't anticipate another bill coming down the pike. With that said, you all probably know former County Executive Angela Alsobrooks was elected to the U.S. Senate to represent Maryland. And so there are currently elections in Prince George's County to replace her. With the new administration coming in, that could be another opportunity for us to revisit with that administration. And as we work with DPI on implementation and enforcement, potentially work out some of these additional kinks, either administratively with the department or, if necessary, legislatively. But at this time, at least I'm foreseeing for at least sort of the next year and a half, there won't be any major changes beyond what's in these two current bills in law.
In addition to Q&A, if some of you who are attending have looked at the bill and have comments on what you think should be changed, I think this is also an opportunity for Brian to hear about that because he will be advocating. So, if there's something that concerns you, it would be nice to just pop it into the chat. So there is a security camera rebate program. And Melinda, do you want to talk a little bit about that or Brian, and maybe, whether or not it really is something they can look forward to?
Yeah, I can chime in a little bit.
Yeah. I'll let Brian go. He knows this better than I do, I think.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, this is something that we pushed for. Basically, our position was that if you're going to require this enhanced level of security, that there be some sort of incentive program or a program from the county to help offset some of the costs. And so they gave us a little bit of an olive branch here. The problem is that Prince George's County doesn't have very much money right now. They're facing massive structural budget deficits. And so it's somewhat of an unfunded mandate. I'm not aware of any AOBA members that have gone through the process and applied for this rebate and have gotten it. And so, we would, for our part, whether you're an AOBA member or not, we'd love to hear from you all if this is something that you do, in fact, go on and apply for after you've done a scope of work and started going through the process of installing the cameras, and you go and apply for this rebate. We'd love to kind of get your experience from what that process is like. But the big challenge here is that the county just doesn't have very much money to, even provide this relatively nominal amount to help offset these costs.
And is there a link or some sort of direction we can take for folks if they were to apply for this?
So I haven't seen an application, but this is something that is on my list to talk to DPI about, because they were supposed to put something out. As you all are going to hear in a moment, just in terms of enforcement and implementation timelines, the timelines have slipped a little bit. And so that's partly why DPI hasn't been as proactive, in addition to the fact that the county doesn't have very much money, but they just haven't been proactive in putting something together, because the timelines and implementation deadlines have slipped a little bit.
We will, when we get that link, share that with all of you and others who didn't make it today. So stay tuned on that one. Okay, let's talk about enforcement. I believe, Melinda, this would be you. So let's talk about that.
All right. So the law is effective now. You should already have your cameras up, or at the very least be making significant efforts to get them up. Now, there is a little bit of a grace period for properties that had their initial use and occupancy permit prior to June 1st of 2004. You guys have until June 1st of this year, 2025, to comply with the law. But if your building is newer, if you had your initial use and occupancy permit after 2024, then technically you're required to be in compliance now. I think one of the open questions that we have, of course, is how is this law going to be enforced? It seems to us, from information that Brian has gotten from DPI and that I've heard from the rumor mill, that this is primarily going to be a complaint-based enforcement. DPI simply does not have the manpower to go out and start touring the county and inspecting every multifamily community to see if they actually have the cameras up. So it's going to be one of those things where if a tenant or somebody complains to the county about your lack of cameras, that's when you're going to get on their radar. We have heard some rumors about county inspectors being out and about unprompted without complaints, being out there looking at properties. I think that is usually properties that are kind of already on the county's radar for other things. They're going to start, you get scrutinized for one thing, you get scrutinized for everything. But it seems, at least right now, what we think is going to happen is that it's mostly going to be complaint-based. And, reporting from the community is going to be what triggers any type of potential ramifications for you not following the law. There are penalties written into the law. There's a civil fine of up to $500 for violators, and that is per day. Each day that you go without being in compliance with the law, you can get fined up to $500 per day. So, obviously, once you get on their radar, you need to act fast. Otherwise, the monetary penalties are going to really rack up pretty quickly.
And I do like the last bullet, which says if it seems like you're trying to implement cameras and storing appropriately and recording the data, then they will be a little bit more lenient on you, correct? If you're in the process.
That's my understanding. I think Brian may have more. I think he talks to the people at DPI more than I do, which God bless him for it. That's the understanding that I have, that they're not really out there looking to screw you guys, at least not over this right away. As long as it seems like you're trying to get in compliance and you're doing your best to meet the requirements of the law, then they're not going to specifically come after you. But it's definitely something that needs to be a concern in your minds, that this is happening and that this needs to be addressed sooner rather than later.
All that is exactly right. We have heard of instances where DPI is coming out to inspect for other things, and that's sort of the second part of the second bullet, other housing code enforcement actions, where they're coming to inspect for other housing code violations, and they notice that a property doesn't have cameras. And so the property owner then gets issued a notice of violation. But for our part, AOBA's part, we have had instances like that happen, including in Garden Style communities, and we have been able to stay enforcement. And now, that there's the extension until June 1st, really what the department is looking to do is to gain compliance. The last thing they want to do is be overly punitive. Ultimately, they want folks to comply. I'll just say, going back to my time in county government, that while there is that per day penalty or citation, in my time in county government, I've never seen it used that way. And I think the times that folks have tried, the courts have tossed that out. They've said this is just, this is one instance. And really, even if something like this does end up getting into the courts. And I know I'm getting a little bit into, maybe Melinda's space here, but in the cases that I've seen in terms of the courts in Maryland, particularly Montgomery and Prince George's County, they give ample time to property owners to correct violations. And so if it looks like you're making an effort to comply, then, most of the time they either give you extensions or, they waive those penalties altogether. But the point is you do need to be making some effort to comply, either, with the scope of work or getting this budgeted, or if you actually have a schedule for the installation of the cameras themselves. Those are all things that show you're making efforts to comply. I can't remember if this is the specific slide that we wanted to get into, maybe some of those particulars about the angles and the resolution.
Yeah, why don't you talk about that? Because I think we might have covered that in a previous slide.
So basically what we've heard from DPI is that their inspectors are already overworked as it is. No one is going to be going around checking exact camera angles, exact resolution, making sure that it's 1080p. What they're really looking for is, are there cameras? Are there any blind spots on the property? Are the cameras able to record? Can the footage be retrieved? And as long as it sort of checks those boxes, then you're good. With that said, that's obviously something that each property owner will have to work with their vendors and their contractors to sort out to make sure that they're complying. The guidance that we're offering to our members is that, don't get too hung up on, is this exactly 180 camera view? Is this, the perfect resolution? Does it get grainy or anything like that in certain spots? The point here is, do you have the cameras? Can they record? Can the footage be retrieved? And if so, you should be good to go.
And I know we've talked a lot about enforcement and compliance, but there are benefits, obviously, to having better security on your property. And I think Whitney can share some of what we've seen across the country in terms of increasing with AI surveillance.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback off of what Brian said, Cloudastructure does offer free site walks and consultations. So if you guys want a second opinion or, don't want to worry about the nitty-gritty details, our team is wonderful understanding what is needed for this law and making sure that that's built into our proposals and estimates for you. So you don't have to worry about, being an expert on 1080p or the angles or anything like that. We have a team that could do that free of charge for you. So just wanted to let you guys know, if you want to utilize our team, feel free to reach out and we can definitely get an estimate put together for you free of charge. And that will include angles and all of those recommendations and requirements. But yeah, like Lauren said, there's also additional benefits, right, to having a proactive solution, AI surveillance. We are camera agnostic at Cloudastructure. So if you guys have an existing system, we can actually work with it in addition to adding different coverage that you need in order to be compliant as well. So it's a really great cost-effective solution. We also are able to pair speakers with those cameras. And what that allows us to do is actually watch unwanted activity while your leasing office is closed or when, the peak of unwanted activity happens at your communities. And then our remote guards are able to do a talk down or dispatch the authorities and deter that crime from escalating into criminal activity on your properties, which obviously is a resource money suck for you guys, and it's a headache, right? And you have unhappy residents and whatnot. So being proactive in that, we have a extremely high deterrence rate. We're 98% crime deterrence to keep your community safe. So that's an incredible statistics. I come from the operations side. I would have loved to have this on my property and my portfolio. But it's really, again, just taking that one step further and being proactive in stopping unwanted activity at your communities.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in here. We've been doing this for a few years now, adding sort of a very cost-effective virtual guard solution in the off hours. They are active during the night, getting alerts, all throughout the night. But what's amazing is across those years that we've been doing it, literally, sometimes we have months where it's 100% deterrent. So what that means is whenever we see suspicious activity and have to talk down and say, hey, you with the blue jacket on, we're watching you. What are you doing or what have you? They leave. And that is so much better if you do it beforehand as opposed to after the fact. In addition, we have complete incident reports, and we have close ties with the police department so that when things do escalate, we can send the information very quickly to the police department so that they can get engaged. So again, it is a complete solution, like Whitney said, and it's been fascinating to see how effective it is. And what else, Whitney? We have lots of multifamily customers, so we have lots of experience to share. But what?
These are just some of our partnerships we like to highlight. And if you're interested in why they're doing business with us and trust us with their communities, I'd love to connect with you and go a little bit deeper into what Cloudastructure offers and how we service our partnerships in the multifamily space. But these are some of our great partnerships that we have established today.
Yeah, and we have very high customer sat. We don't have our customer success person on today, but we have very high customer success rankings here and very high retention. So feel free to even reach out to any of these folks. We can provide some coverage or linkage to you for that. So I think now we're going to open it up to questions and answers. So let's see, I'm going to stop sharing. And I did see one question come across. To release the camera footage, or are we required to have something from the courts by the requester before we release it?
I'll take this one. It's always up to you. You're not required to demand a court order, but you certainly can. You can request that there be a court order. The law says that it does not say that you have to automatically hand over the footage to a tenant, to law enforcement, or to someone with a bona fide interest. It only says that you have to retain the footage. And that's just so that, litigation is slow, right? It takes a while. And I know that it used to be that security camera systems would delete the footage, after a week, 2 weeks, 30 days, whatever it is. And a lot of times when people go to get into court over these types of things, the footage is already gone. It's been erased, it's been written over, all those kinds of things. So this way you are just required to store the footage. And I apologize, guys, my cat, I tried to I incarcerated him upstairs, and he was given early release, I guess, because he's back. So you're just required to save the footage, to make sure that it's available in case there's a criminal case that goes to court, or there's some type of civil complaint or litigation over it. That's the way I interpret it. As always, I hope Brian will chime in if he disagrees with anything that I'm saying, because even though I like to think that I'm always right, it is regrettably not the case that I'm always right.
No, I think that's exactly right. We encourage folks to work with our law enforcement partners. Obviously, you're wanting to get these crimes and issues resolved. And so it's sort of a case-by-case basis here. But, whenever possible, we do encourage folks to work with law enforcement to try and resolve these things. I think it creates a better relationship between the property managers and staff and local law enforcement. So, I think that's exactly right. It just says you have to store the footage. It doesn't say, exactly when you have to turn it over. Obviously, if you get a court order that says you have to turn it over, then, you have to comply with that. There was a sort of secondary question related to who's a person of interest, and I'll let Melinda chime in here as well. And I don't have the statute or the bill text right in front of me, but this is another one where we encourage folks to err on the side of caution, and if someone is involved in an incident, is on footage, and they've reported it to the community that there's been an incident, and they're looking to get access to it. Obviously, staff needs to review that, but that would fall under sort of a person of interest. But I don't think it's super specific as to how broad that is or how encompassing that might be.
That's right. There hasn't really been. I don't think the law specifically defined person with bona fide interest. I would just consider if someone comes to you to the front office and says, hey, I was here visiting my girlfriend last night and my car got stolen in your parking lot. That's a person with a bona fide interest because they've been a victim of a crime that occurred on your property. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, we think this might be happening, then, I would err on the side of caution as well. And I think it's always better to try and foster a good relationship with local law enforcement. It can certainly be very helpful to you if you ever end up with a situation on your property where you need some help. You got drug activity or whatever. then it's always helpful to have a friend in law enforcement in those types of situations. You're not required to automatically hand over footage to them and cooperate fully, but I think more often than not, it's the right way to go. But again, it's always a case-by-case basis. So if you're contacted by law enforcement or by Susie's boyfriend or whoever, and you're not sure if this is a situation where you have to take action or where you should not take action, then please reach out to your attorney, whether it be me at Offit Kurman or another firm. I always think it's a good idea to consult with your local counsel when questions like this arise.
Yeah. And, some properties we've had some properties that get 15 incidences a night. So it can be a little unwieldy to kind of save all that footage, organize it. What do I do with it? What have you? And so if you are looking for a solution, that might be a question you ask your provider. And that's one of the things that we do is, and Whitney, I'll let you talk about that, is really quickly store incident data. And it can be stored forever, essentially. But Whitney, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, so not only do we have a full support team that will help you in incident reporting, even if something happens during office hours where our remote guards are not contracted to watch your community, we have a full support team that will actually dive in and do the video review for you, put together that incident report, and really take that off of your plate because it can be very time consuming. But in addition to that, we have a feature called our playlist feature. You can save that video footage and it will be organized, and you can save it into a playlist, and it's saved to up to a year free of charge. So no additional charge on that. And you can also download it to a hard drive. You can have a shareable link. So if you do need to share it with insurance providers, the authorities, ownership groups, you can definitely share that safe and secure with a 7-day link. Click of a button, you put in their email. It's super easy to use. And then anybody who needs access to that information can quickly assess the situation and have their input as well.
Yeah. It makes it so much easier. It's like when you like a song, it's like, oh, I want to put that in my playlist, boom, over there. So all the incidences at really a click can be put into a quick playlist so that you don't really have to be worrying about finding it later. Or where do I store it? How do I organize it? So it's a really great feature. I have a question here about lead times. What is the lead time to installation typically? What are we seeing, Whitney?
Yeah. So depending on, from estimate to install, it can be as quick as 4 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks is typically what we're seeing in the PG County area specifically. However, if, we need to make it a priority, we do have lots of partnerships in place and can push that up on the priority list if you're trying to get compliant right away. So, but typically 4 to 6 weeks is what we're looking at for install. Okay,
terrific. I'm not seeing too many questions. I'd love to hear from the group. Maybe just pop it into the chat. I mean, how are you guys feeling about the mandate? Are you comfortable? Are you still feeling like you're confused? Is there an area where you would like more information? Just pop it into the chat and we'll make sure that we address it now or we can address it in the future. So I'll give you a minute to do that. And in the meantime, here, I'd like to just suggest that if you would like to know more about how to store your surveillance as evidence, we have another webinar scheduled for next month, February 13th, 12 p.m. Eastern. And in this, we'll have another legal partner that we have, Amanda Podlucky. She's the partner at Cobb Gonzalez, and she will be going over really what are the best practices for storing your surveillance footage as evidence. And we did touch on that a little bit today, but we'll be going deeper on that. Let's see, and I'm just going to stop my share. Kathleen will put the registration link in there. That's terrific. Okay, so one question in the Q&A is, will we need to install in each building? I think the answer to that is, I don't think it's actually, I'll step in here, but you don't have to necessarily install cameras at every building now, well, in the garden style anyway, correct? As long as there is a camera that's facing the entrance or the exit, it can cover multiple buildings. And so that has reduced the number of cameras needed. But anyone want to speak to that one?
I'll jump in just from, our other partnerships in PG County that we've been working with on their communities. We did have a lot of garden style estimates and proposals out there, game plans, and they came back when this got tweaked and we actually scaled back the coverage, making sure that, again, we could cover multiple entrances and exits, but you can do that with pulling back that camera count and minimal camera coverage. So we were able to adjust that, and yes, that's what we're seeing.
And reduce the investment, which is great. And I guess lastly, I'll just say that, we at Cloudastructure understand that this is a mandate that was placed. We do recognize that there's benefits, but we do offer a full solution, including cameras, and we're all about leveraging your investment. And so if you do need new cameras, we are offering our cameras at 50% off for PG County alone due to this mandate. So hopefully something that eases the pain of the budget. Okay, so I'm not seeing any additional questions. I want to thank Melinda and Brian and Whitney for the great information today. Hopefully it was valuable to the audience, and we will keep you informed and updated as this kind of moves along if there's any changes. And of course, please reach out to us if you have any questions, and we look forward to continuing to provide you guys with some information as we move forward. Thanks, everybody.